What's the worst lie someone told about you that everyone believed? The worst lie someone told about me was that I'd been grooming 15-year-old Megan in my AP history class, sending her inappropriate text messages and trying to meet her after school. What made it devastating wasn't just the accusation itself, but how perfectly it was crafted to destroy everything I'd built over 12 years of teaching. The lie came from Brittany, Megan's best friend, who'd been failing my class and facing summer school that would cost her a spot on the varsity cheerleading team she'd worked 4 years to captain. I found out about the accusation the same way everyone else did. Principal David called me into his office at 7:30 on a Thursday morning, 30 minutes before first period. I walked in expecting to discuss the upcoming advanced placement exam schedule, maybe debate whether we needed more proctors for the testing sessions. Instead, I found David sitting behind his desk with Dr. Rebecca, the district's crisis management coordinator, and Officer James from the school resource unit. The conference table held manila folders, a digital recorder, and my personal cell phone, which had been confiscated from my classroom desk while I'd been making copies in the main office. David wouldn't make eye contact as he read from a prepared script about allegations of inappropriate conduct between faculty and students. Dr. Rebecca explained that a student had come forward with concerning information about text messages and after-school contact that violated district policy and potentially state law. Officer James informed me that I was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation and that I needed to surrender my keys, ID badge, and laptop immediately. The meeting lasted 8 minutes, and by the time I walked to the parking lot, my access cards had already been deactivated, and the locks on my classroom door had been changed. The accusation spread through the school like wildfire, the way only teenage gossip can move through social media and whispered conversations between classes. Within hours, screenshots of text conversations about the allegations were circulating on every platform, with students adding their own speculation and commentary. The hashtag #OurHighSchoolPredator started trending locally as parents shared the news in community Facebook groups and neighborhood apps. By lunch that same day, I was getting texts from colleagues asking if the rumors were true, parents demanding to know why I hadn't been arrested yet, and reporters calling my home phone asking for comment on the inappropriate relationship allegations. The school parking lot filled with news vans by dismissal time, and students were posting selfies with the reporters, treating the whole situation like entertainment. My wife Elena found out when her principal called to inform her that due to the investigation at my school, she was being temporarily reassigned from her elementary teaching position until the matter was resolved. 3 parents had already called the elementary school demanding Elena be removed from their children's classrooms, claiming they couldn't trust someone married to a suspected predator to maintain appropriate boundaries. Elena sat in our kitchen crying after that phone call, holding our mortgage statement and wondering how we'd pay our bills without her income. Our daughter Sophia heard about it from classmates at her middle school who'd seen the posts on Instagram and Snapchat calling me a predator. She came home that first day, asking if I was going to jail and whether she'd have to change her last name. What Brittany had told investigators was a masterpiece of calculated destruction, mixing just enough truth with devastating lies to make the whole story believable. She claimed that over the past 2 months, I'd been keeping Megan after class for extra help sessions that gradually became personal conversations about her home life and future plans. According to Brittany's statement, these sessions had progressed to text messaging outside school hours, starting with homework questions, but evolving into inappropriate personal messages that made Megan uncomfortable. Brittany said Megan had shown her screenshots of texts where I complimented her appearance, asked about her relationship status, and suggested meeting at a coffee shop near school to continue our conversations privately. The genius of Brittany's lie was how it incorporated real elements that could be verified, then twisted them into something sinister. I had kept Megan after class twice for extra help, but only because she was struggling with essay structure and had specifically requested additional assistance. Those sessions had lasted 20 minutes each and took place with my classroom door propped open, following district protocol for one-on-one student meetings. I had texted parents about homework assignments through the school's official communication app, but never individual students on personal phones. The coffee shop Brittany mentioned was one where I met my colleague Sarah every Friday after school to grade papers and plan lessons, something dozens of people could verify. But in Brittany's version, these innocent details became evidence of grooming and predatory behavior. The investigation moved with terrifying speed and thoroughness. Within 48 hours, the district had hired an outside firm specializing in educator misconduct cases, and they began interviewing every student who'd taken my classes over the past 3 years. The investigators set up in the school library, calling students out of class one by one to ask about their interactions with me. My colleagues watched helplessly as the administration treated me like a pariah, removing my name from classroom doors and reassigning my lesson plans to substitute teachers. The maintenance staff changed the locks on my classroom and placed yellow tape across the entrance like it was a crime scene. My phone records were subpoenaed, showing months of text message activity that investigators claimed supported the allegations. They analyzed every call, every text, every email, looking for patterns that might indicate inappropriate contact with students. My classroom was searched by district officials and police officers, who photographed everything from my desk drawers to the posters on my walls, treating normal teaching materials like potential evidence of criminal behavior. My computer hard drive was imaged, and forensic specialists combed through years of lesson plans, student communications, and personal files, looking for anything that could be construed as evidence of grooming or inappropriate interest in minors. Security footage from the past semester was reviewed frame by frame for evidence of after-school contact with students, with investigators paying special attention to any moments when I was alone with female students, or appeared to be having private conversations. The district's legal team recommended that the matter be referred to the county prosecutor's office for potential criminal charges related to improper communication with a minor and attempted child enticement. The school board held an emergency session that same evening, voting unanimously to terminate my employment immediately rather than waiting for the investigation to conclude. Board members took turns expressing their shock and disappointment, with one saying that even the possibility of such allegations made me unfit to work with children. The teachers' union representative tried to argue for due process, but the board chair cut him off, saying they had a duty to protect students above all else. Elena and I hired the best defense attorney we could afford, which meant taking a second mortgage on our house and borrowing money from both sets of parents. Attorney David specialized in defending educators accused of misconduct, and his first piece of advice was to prepare for a long battle that would destroy my reputation regardless of the outcome. He explained that in cases involving teacher-student allegations, the public assumes guilt from the moment charges are filed, and even complete exoneration rarely restores a teacher's career or community standing. He'd seen innocent teachers lose their homes, marriages, and mental health fighting false accusations that took years to resolve through the legal system. His retainer alone cost $8,000, with additional fees for expert witnesses, private investigators, and forensic analysis that could easily reach $50,000 before the case was over. Word of the investigation spread like wildfire throughout our community and beyond, fueled by social media posts and neighborhood gossip that painted me as a predator who'd systematically groomed a vulnerable student. Parents shared screenshots and rumors across multiple platforms, with many expressing shock that someone they'd trusted with their children could do such things. The story included details about my 12 years of teaching, my Teacher of the Year award, and my family. But these facts were overshadowed by the serious allegations and speculation from community members who claimed they'd always sensed something was off about me. The story spread throughout our region as parents shared details on social media and discussed the case in community groups and school parking lots. Parents from neighboring districts commented that they'd always had concerns about male teachers working with teenage girls, and some called for mandatory background checks to be repeated annually for all school employees. Education blogs and parenting forums featured discussions about the need for better oversight of teacher-student communications, using my case as evidence that the system was failing to protect children. Online discussion forums buzzed with speculation about my guilt and debates about whether the evidence seemed convincing. The community reaction was swift and merciless. Parents created a Facebook group demanding my immediate termination and calling for a review of all teachers who had unsupervised contact with students. The group gained 300 members in its first day, with parents sharing horror stories about inappropriate teachers from other districts and speculating about other potential victims in my classes. Several parents posted screenshots of perfectly innocent emails I'd sent about their children's academic progress, now reinterpreting them as evidence of suspicious behavior they'd missed. One parent claimed that my suggestion for their child to stay after school for tutoring had actually been an attempt to isolate and groom them. Another parent said they'd always found it strange that I remembered so many details about my students' lives, now viewing my genuine interest in their education as predatory behavior. The local school board scheduled an emergency meeting to address community concerns about student safety and district oversight of faculty conduct. The meeting was packed with angry parents demanding answers and calling for policy changes. Several speakers used their public comment time to question how someone like me had passed background checks and psychological evaluations required for teaching positions. A mother of one of my former students tearfully described how her daughter had mentioned liking my class, which she now interpreted as evidence that I had successfully manipulated her child. The school board announced the formation of a task force to review all teacher-student communication policies and promised that additional security measures would be implemented immediately. They also revealed plans to hire an outside consultant to audit the entire district's hiring and monitoring practices. My daughter Sophia became a target at her middle school, with classmates calling her father a pervert and asking if he'd ever touched her inappropriately. She came home crying every day for 2 weeks before Elena and I decided to transfer her to a private school 40 minutes away, adding another financial burden to our growing legal expenses. The harassment at school was relentless and cruel in the way only middle schoolers can manage. Students would whisper "predator" when she walked past in hallways, and someone created a fake social media account posting doctored photos of our family with captions suggesting I was a danger to children. Sophia's former friends stopped talking to her, and their parents made it clear she was no longer welcome at sleepovers or birthday parties. The school counselor called us after Sophia broke down during lunch, having been cornered by a group of 8th graders who demanded to know if I had ever done anything weird to her at home. Elena faced similar harassment at work, with parents questioning whether someone married to an alleged predator should be teaching their elementary students. 3 families requested their children be transferred out of her classroom, and the school principal asked her to take a voluntary leave of absence until the situation was resolved. The stress caused her to develop panic attacks and insomnia, and she started seeing a therapist to cope with the anxiety of living under constant public scrutiny and suspicion. Our marriage was strained as we dealt with financial pressure, public humiliation, and the constant fear that I might actually go to prison. Elena never doubted my innocence, but she struggled with anger that my career had destroyed our entire family's life and reputation. Some nights, she would lie awake making backup plans for how she and Sophia would survive if I were convicted and sent away for years. 3 weeks into the investigation, the county prosecutor announced that formal charges would be filed against me for improper communication with a minor and attempted child enticement, both felony charges that carried potential prison sentences of up to 5 years each. The prosecutor made a public statement explaining that educators held positions of special trust and that any violation of that trust would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. He displayed copies of text messages allegedly sent from my phone, though the content was partially redacted to protect the minor victim's privacy. The visible portions showed messages asking about meeting after school and complimenting the student's work in ways that could be interpreted as grooming behavior. Word of the charges spread rapidly through the community, with hundreds of people posting comments online expressing outrage that I hadn't been arrested sooner. The prosecutor emphasized that the case represented a pattern of predatory behavior that likely affected multiple victims, and he encouraged other students or parents to come forward with additional information. He announced the creation of a special hotline for reporting educator misconduct and promised that every allegation would be thoroughly investigated. The district attorney's office released a statement saying they had zero tolerance for adults who exploited positions of authority to harm children, and that my case would serve as a deterrent to other potential offenders in educational settings. Attorney David filed motions challenging the evidence, arguing that the text message records had been obtained improperly and that the prosecution's case relied entirely on hearsay from a single source with questionable motives. He pointed out that no inappropriate physical contact was alleged, no explicit sexual content was found in any communications, and no other students had reported similar behavior despite extensive interviews with hundreds of current and former students. The prosecution responded by adding charges of official misconduct and child exploitation, claiming that my position of authority over students made any personal communication inherently criminal, regardless of content or intent. My legal team hired a private investigator to look into Brittany's background and motivations for making the accusations. The investigator discovered that Brittany had a history of lying to authority figures when facing consequences for her behavior. In elementary school, she had falsely accused a teacher of physical abuse when she was disciplined for cheating on a test. In middle school, she had claimed that a coach was showing favoritism to other players when she was benched for missing too many practices. These incidents had been dismissed or handled internally, so they weren't part of any official record that would have alerted investigators to her credibility issues. The investigator also found evidence that Brittany had been researching teacher misconduct cases online for months before making her accusations, studying the types of evidence and testimony that led to successful prosecutions. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later, giving both sides time to prepare their cases and allowing community interest to build to a fever pitch. Parents and community members followed every development closely, often gathering in coffee shops and school parking lots to discuss the latest rumors and updates. Child safety advocates organized rallies calling for stronger protections for students and harsher penalties for educators who violated their positions of trust. The school district announced policy changes requiring all teacher-student communications to go through official channels and prohibiting private meetings between faculty and students without administrative supervision. As the trial date approached, community discussion and speculation intensified. People throughout the region discussed educator misconduct and debated what warning signs parents should watch for in their children's teachers. Online commentators analyzed every detail of the evidence and debated whether the charges were justified. Online forums dedicated to discussing criminal cases attracted thousands of participants who dissected every detail of the allegations and debated whether the charges were justified. Many commenters expressed certainty that I was guilty simply because prosecutors wouldn't file charges without solid evidence, while others argued that the case seemed suspicious, given the lack of corroborating victims or physical evidence. The court had to implement special security measures due to threats against both me and Megan, with some vigilante groups promising to take justice into their own hands regardless of the trial's outcome. During this entire nightmare, the one piece that never made sense to me was Megan herself. Throughout the investigation, she'd been largely invisible, providing her initial statement through her parents and the district's trained interviewer, but never speaking publicly about the alleged inappropriate contact. When reporters tried to interview her family, they declined comment and referred all questions to their attorney. At school, according to colleagues who still spoke to me, Megan seemed withdrawn and uncomfortable whenever the case was mentioned, often leaving the room when other students discussed it. Her grades had dropped significantly, and she'd quit several extracurricular activities, behavior that prosecutors cited as evidence of trauma from my alleged grooming attempts. What troubled me most was that Megan had been one of my most engaged students before the accusations surfaced. She participated actively in class discussions, turned in assignments on time, and seemed genuinely interested in history. She had never displayed any signs of discomfort around me, never avoided eye contact or tried to stay away from my classroom. In fact, she had been planning to take my advanced placement history course the following year and had asked for my recommendation for a summer history program at the local university. Her sudden transformation from an enthusiastic student to a trauma victim who couldn't bear to be in the same building as me made no sense, unless something had fundamentally changed her perception of our previous interactions. It wasn't until much later that I realized she was as much a victim of Brittany's manipulation as I was. Attorney David's investigation into Brittany revealed several concerning details that should have raised red flags from the beginning. Brittany had been caught plagiarizing twice in the previous semester, had received multiple discipline referrals for disruptive behavior, and was facing academic probation that would have prevented her from participating in athletics and student government. Her parents had contacted the school administration 3 times demanding that her failing grade in my class be changed, arguing that my teaching methods were discriminatory and that their daughter was being unfairly targeted for personality conflicts with me rather than academic performance. When these complaints were rejected, Brittany had been overheard by multiple students threatening to find a way to get me fired. The depth of Brittany's resentment became clear as the investigation progressed. She had been furious about receiving a D- on a major essay assignment, claiming that I had graded her more harshly than other students because I didn't like her. In reality, her essay had contained extensive plagiarism from online sources, factual errors that she could have easily caught with basic research, and a thesis statement that completely contradicted the evidence she presented. When I offered her the opportunity to rewrite the essay for partial credit, she had become belligerent and accused me of singling her out for persecution. Her parents had scheduled a meeting with the principal to demand that her grade be changed, but the principal had supported my evaluation after reviewing her work and comparing it to other students' assignments. That meeting had taken place just 2 weeks before Brittany made her accusations to the authorities. The breakthrough in our defense came from an unexpected source. Dr. Lisa, a forensic computer specialist hired to analyze the text message evidence, discovered something that made her call Attorney David at home on a Sunday evening. She had been working late, running additional tests on the digital evidence when she noticed irregularities in the metadata that suggested tampering. The metadata embedded in the text messages showed they'd been sent from a phone that wasn't mine, using spoofing software that masked the real sender's number while displaying mine as the originating contact. The timestamps revealed that several messages had been sent during times when I could prove I was in meetings, teaching classes, or attending school functions with dozens of witnesses. More damaging to the prosecution's case, the phone used to create the fake messages was registered to Brittany's older brother, a college sophomore studying computer science who'd been home for winter break when many of the alleged messages were sent. Dr. Lisa spent 3 sleepless days documenting her findings, creating a comprehensive technical report that proved the messages had been fabricated using commercially available spoofing software. The software allowed users to send text messages that appeared to come from any phone number, making it nearly impossible for the recipient to detect the deception without forensic analysis. The program even provided options for scheduling messages to be sent at specific times, which explained how some messages had been sent when I was provably elsewhere. Most damning was the discovery that the same spoofing software had been used to create fake messages to other phone numbers, suggesting that Brittany and her brother had been experimenting with the technology before targeting me. Attorney David filed an emergency motion to dismiss all charges based on fabricated evidence, including Dr. Lisa's technical analysis and sworn statements from witnesses who could account for my whereabouts during the times I was allegedly sending inappropriate messages. The motion included detailed technical documentation proving that the messages had been created using spoofing software and timestamps showing they had been sent when I was provably elsewhere. The prosecution initially fought the motion, claiming that even if some messages were fake, others might be genuine, and the case should proceed to trial. However, when Dr. Lisa testified about the spoofing software and provided a detailed technical explanation of how the entire message thread had been fabricated, the prosecutor was forced to acknowledge that their primary evidence had been manufactured. The courtroom was packed with reporters, parents, and community members who had followed the case for months. Many had come expecting to see me convicted and sentenced based on the damaging media coverage and the prosecutor's confident statements about the strength of their case. Instead, they watched as Dr. Lisa systematically dismantled the prosecution's evidence with technical expertise that left no room for doubt. She demonstrated how the spoofing software worked, showed the court exactly when and where the fake messages had been created, and presented phone records proving that I had been nowhere near the locations where the messages allegedly originated. The judge listened intently as she explained the digital forensics process, asking detailed questions that showed he understood the significance of her findings. The real story emerged during the investigation that followed the dismissal of charges against me. Brittany had orchestrated the entire scheme with help from her brother Trevor, who provided the technical expertise to create convincing fake text messages that appeared to come from my phone number. Brittany had manipulated Megan, her closest friend, into believing that I had actually sent inappropriate messages by showing her the fabricated screenshots and convincing her that she was in danger. Megan, trusting her best friend, and genuinely frightened by what appeared to be predatory behavior from a teacher she'd previously respected, had reluctantly agreed to report the situation to the school administration. Brittany had coached her on what to say and how to present the evidence, all while positioning herself as the concerned friend trying to protect a vulnerable victim. The investigation into Brittany's actions revealed the depth of planning and manipulation that had gone into destroying my life and career. She'd researched educator misconduct cases online to understand what types of allegations would be most damaging and difficult to disprove. She'd studied my schedule and teaching methods to create realistic scenarios for inappropriate contact that would seem plausible to investigators. She'd even planted seeds of gossip among other students weeks before making the formal accusation, creating a whisper campaign that made the allegations seem more credible when they were finally reported. Her brother Trevor faced federal charges for computer fraud and identity theft, while Brittany was charged with filing a false police report, perjury, and conspiracy to commit fraud. District Attorney Catherine held a press conference announcing that I'd been completely exonerated and that the allegations against me had been fabricated by a student seeking revenge for academic consequences. She apologized for the prosecution's handling of the case and announced new protocols for verifying digital evidence in future investigations. However, the damage to my reputation and career was already done, and no amount of official vindication could undo the months of public humiliation and professional destruction. The school district offered to reinstate me with back pay, but returning to Windsor Heights High School felt impossible given the toxic atmosphere that had developed around my name and the ongoing skepticism from parents who couldn't believe that someone who seemed so guilty could actually be innocent. Elena and I decided to start over in a different state, using the settlement money from our civil lawsuit against the school district to relocate to Colorado, where I could apply for teaching positions without the baggage of the false allegations following us every day. Sophia thrived in her new school, making friends who knew nothing about the nightmare we'd endured, and Elena found a position at an elementary school that welcomed her experience and dedication. I eventually returned to teaching at a small rural high school that was desperate enough for qualified teachers to overlook the controversy in my past, especially after reviewing the court documents that proved my innocence and the malicious nature of the accusations against me. Brittany was sentenced to 2 years of probation and community service, while her brother Trevor received 6 months in federal prison for the computer crimes. Megan, who had been as much a victim of Brittany's manipulation as I had been, transferred to another school and eventually graduated with honors. She sent me a handwritten letter during her senior year, apologizing for her role in the false accusations, and explaining how Brittany had convinced her that I was dangerous and that reporting me was the only way to protect other students. The letter meant more to me than any official vindication because it acknowledged the human cost of lies and the way manipulation can turn good people into unwilling accomplices in destroying innocent lives. 5 years later, I received a phone call from attorney David informing me that Brittany had been arrested again, this time for filing false sexual assault charges against her college boyfriend after he'd broken up with her. The pattern was identical to what she'd done to me, using fabricated evidence and emotional manipulation to convince others that she was trying to protect potential victims from a dangerous predator. Her second set of false accusations had fallen apart even faster than the first, but not before destroying another innocent person's reputation and demonstrating that her attack on me hadn't been an isolated incident of teenage revenge, but part of a pattern of sociopathic behavior that would continue throughout her life. Some people are just broken in ways that make them dangerous to everyone around them, and the only justice is making sure the world knows what they're capable of before they destroy their next victim. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.